Good afternoon and welcome to BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. Our guest today is Gabriel Yap, Executive Chairman of GCP Global. Gabriel, as always, great to have you on the Friday.
Yes, what a Friday, Brian.
Now, Gabriel, before we get your insights, let's take a look at how regional markets are performing. We'll start close to home with the SGX. It's at 3,194.59. It's up 0.68%. Bursa Malaysia is at 1,579.6. It's up 0.08%. Now, across the region, again, it continues a sea of green. Nikkei is at 29,377.25. It's up 0.16%. Shanghai Composite is at 3,455.79. It's up 0.42%. The Hang Seng is at 28,787.11. It's up 0.52%. The ASX 200 is at 7,086. It's up 0.35%. And rounding off the numbers is the Kospi, which is at 3,204. It's up 0.77%. Gabriel, what's your insight into how markets are performing this morning?
It's actually a continuation from last week, Brian. I think we saw last week as a continuance, we actually had strong corporate results. And following into this week, we're actually seeing that again. In fact, in the history of the Dow, for example, you have never seen, the actual results for many of the tech companies, the infotech companies, the AI companies, the robotics companies, beating expectations way and above analyst expectation. This round, you'll see that the earnings beat was actually much bigger than expected. But unfortunately, the share prices could have actually gone ahead of themselves, and that's why you are seeing that many of the share prices for the respective companies after reporting the results have been rather lackadaisical.
Now, also, all eyes are on today's non-farm payroll numbers, where economists expect 1 million jobs plus were added in April. Now, that given that the unemployment rate numbers are down and they've fallen to 5.8% from 6%, according to Dow Jones. Now, what's your view on how this is going to impact Asian markets?
I think this actually dovetails in very clearly with the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, guiding notes early part this week when she was actually misinterpreted to say that interest rates is going to go up. I think what she has actually meant was that it's inevitable that inflation rates will go up this year because you are comparing a higher base compared to a much lower base last year. Which means that the recovery coming in tech will filter through with some inflationary numbers. So to then expect interest rates to actually catch up because of that, that's not unsurprising. And some of the things that will fuel interest rate increases or anticipations will be things like the job numbers, as you have seen, the non-farm employment numbers, the PPI numbers, as well as the CPI numbers. I think we're going to see a couple of very strong ones because you notice at this period, at this time, the same period last year, those are the same numbers that actually have been hammered down because of COVID-19. So on a year-to-year comparison, it's going to be strong, but this doesn't mean that going into 2022, that momentum will continue.
You talk about good numbers have come out this morning. Chinese export numbers came out and they rose 32.3% in April from a year ago. Estimates were at around the 24.1% growth level. Imports also rose 43.1%, topping expectations. So based on that, do you see this momentum continuing?
Remember last week, Brian, we talked about the Chinese PMI numbers. You can see that essentially today's numbers have continued to confirm that the recovery from China is no longer just driven by the low base COVID-19 comparison of 2020. But you notice that essentially being the first economy to recover, the numbers that are actually fueling the growth is actually slow and steady. But nonetheless, the momentum that's actually built up, is continuing to be very strong. So, for example, if you notice that we just ended this week, right? I mean, the first week of May in China is actually the Labor Day holidays, and you can see that domestic travel this year compared to last year, albeit at a lower comparison last year, is almost 100% up. 100% up, Brian.
So, and I think that's momentum is set to continue. But let's bring the conversation closer to home. And SPH, Singapore Press Holdings, announced a restructuring yesterday, and that will essentially shift it to becoming an asset owner and manager. What's your take on this announcement?
Well, first and foremost, actually, there are two aspects of the announcement. One that I really like, and the one that I really do not like. The one that I really like is that for the first time, you are able to decipher and separate the media business, which is loss making, from the rest of the business. So once and for all, you actually get to hive that off. But what I do not like is that with the taking off the media assets, they're actually giving some good assets, like for example, SPH REIT shares into the new companies to form. Now, I find that actually rather baffling.
Yeah. Now, you talk about also then results that have just been coming out of Singapore. We started last week with the banks, with DBS reporting stellar earnings. Yesterday, UOB reported a net profit of 1 billion after tax. OCBC this morning came in at a record 1.5 billion. Now, Gabriel, are the bank's earnings a strong signal that the recovery momentum in Singapore is very strong?
To some extent, yes. I think the bank's results are clearly, looking at all three of them, a reflection of strong demand for loan growth. That's clearly filtering through. But of course, you have to bear that in mind that it's coming at lower net interest margin. But in this low interest rate environment, essentially the bank's income are also driven from the other aspects of the P&L, which is the commission income. So commission income arising, for example, like fund management activities, insurance, in the case of OCBC, is actually filtering through the results. So yes and no, it is actually a good reflection of the slowly but steadily growing recovery in Singapore.
Now, Gabriel, thank you very much for taking the time to come on the show.
Have a good weekend, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Gabriel. We've been speaking to Gabriel Yap, Executive Chairman of GCP Global, on BizTech's ASEAN Midday Market Watch. I'm Brian Fernandez. Check out our Facebook and LinkedIn sites, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. Please subscribe and like our various platforms. Thank you very much for tuning in.